A nobleman dragged from his warm bed in the dead of night, a coarse sack yanked over his head before he can even scream. He's carried through corridors so secret that most palace guards have never seen them. He ends up in a cold stone room lit by a single candle. And across from him sits a woman wearing a silk nightrobe and a crown of pure terror. One swing of a sword later, an entire noble bloodline is wiped from the history books. This really happened. And for 269 years, everyone who knew the truth took the secret to their graves, till one tiny, crumpled piece of paper refused to stay buried. Tonight, I'm going to tell you the full, unfiltered story of Queen Elisiv of LRNV, a woman every schoolbook still calls gentle, pious, and beloved, while the people who actually worked inside the palace whispered an entirely different title, the Shadow Queen. She ran illegal midnight courts, forged the king's signature with chilling perfection, and buried a high-born lord so completely that even his children were told he died of a sudden fever. Stay until the very end, because I'm going to show you the actual death warrant discovered in 2017, and the one garden inside the palace that has been locked to the public since 1748 with a lie that is still repeated on every official tour. Picture Europe in the 1740s. The kingdom of LRNV sits wedged between Sweden and the Baltic Sea. Small, but obscenely rich from amber and silver mines. Its capital gleams. White marble fountains shaped like swans, streets perfumed with frankincense drifting from golden censers. Orchestras rehearsing in the snow for balls that lasted until sunrise. Foreign visitors rode home in disbelief. Paradise has a postal address. But paradise always has a cellar. LRNV's cellar was called the Inner House. The Inner House was a fortress within the fortress. A maze of windowless corridors, hidden staircases, and doors that only opened if you knew the exact knock. No architect ever put it on any official plan. If you were a foreign ambassador and you accidentally wandered too close, guards appeared out of nowhere and politely turned you around. Inside those walls happened every ugly thing royalty needs to keep breathing. Poisonings, forced confessions, secret births, and quiet disappearances. At the center of the maze was a small octagonal room everyone called the Queen's Chapel. On the door hung a silver crucifix and a velvet kneeler, perfect for photographs and diplomatic magazines. Servants knew the truth. The kneeler had never been used. Instead, a plain oak table stood in the middle, always covered with fresh black wax and a single candlestick. That was where Queen Elisiv read the reports that arrived after midnight. Reports written in lemon juice, in code, or sometimes in blood. By 1748, Elisiv had been queen for 15 years, yet almost nobody realized she had become the most powerful person in the kingdom. Her public image was flawless: soft voice, delicate health, always embroidering altar cloths for orphanages. Behind the scenes, she had created a spiderweb of informants that reached further than the king's own spies. A 10-year-old scullery girl who listened at keyholes. A duchess who passed letters hidden in her hairstyle. A priest who heard confessions from drunk ministers and wrote everything down. All of them reported to one person, and one person only, Elisiv. On the night everything exploded, the temperature outside dropped to -20. The palace was asleep under a blanket of fresh snow. At 1:30, a stooped old man in servant's livery slipped through the corridors carrying a letter sealed with plain red wax. No crest, no ribbon. That was a death sentence if anyone stopped him. He was the Queen's oldest advisor, a man who had served her since she was 14. He had never written anything down before. He did now. The letter was short enough to memorize. My queen, Lord Henrik Varnskald, has proof. He knows your secret. Act tonight or lose everything. Elisiv read it 3 times. Then she did something the servants had never seen. She screamed. Not loud, just one sharp animal sound that made the 2 guards outside jump. For 3 full hours she did not move from the chapel. Servants stationed at the end of the corridor heard paper tearing, glass shattering, and then absolute silence. When the door finally opened at 5 in the morning, her face was calm, almost serene. She gave a single order in a voice as cold as the snow outside. Bring me Captain Ulrich, alone. Tell no one. Captain Magnus Ulrich was 42 years old, scarred from shoulder to wrist, and had sworn his life to the king when he was 16. He arrived expecting urgent news from the Russian border. Instead, the Queen closed the chapel door, looked him dead in the eye, and spoke 5 words that turned his world upside down. Tonight we hold a night court. Ulrich felt the floor tilt. Night courts had been abolished 3 centuries earlier, after a king used them to murder half the nobility. They were illegal, blasphemous, and punishable by excommunication and death. Only the reigning monarch could call one, and even then only Parliament could confirm it. Ulrich opened his mouth to protest. The Queen raised one finger. That was enough. He had seen what happened to people who raised their voice to her. 20 minutes past midnight, 6 masked guards broke into the elegant townhouse of Lord Henrik Varneskold. They moved like ghosts. No boots on the marble, no lanterns. Henrik was asleep next to his wife, gloved hand clamped over his mouth, a sack over his head, and within 90 seconds he was gone. His wife was told he had been called to the palace on urgent business. She never saw him again. They carried him through the inner house along a route that smelled of damp stone and old blood. When the sack was ripped off, Henrik found himself tied to a plain wooden chair in a circular room he had never known existed. 1 candle for people. Queen Elisiv, on a small ebony throne, wearing a black velvet robe, 3 hooded advisors whose faces he couldn't see, and Captain Ulrich standing behind her, pale as chalk, hand already resting on the hilt of his sword. Henrik was a proud man. He demanded his rights under the Magna Carta of 1689. Public trial, written charges, the king's seal. The Queen smiled the way a cat smiles at a bird with a broken wing. She spoke only 8 words tonight, Henrik. I am the law you swore. The trial lasted 7 minutes. The advisors never asked a question. They simply wrote the verdict on a scrap of parchment and slid it across the table. Death. Immediate. Henrik understood this wasn't about treason against the crown. This was personal. In the second before the blade fell, he did the one thing he could still do. He screamed the secret. 4 words, loud enough to echo down the stone corridor. We still don't know exactly what those 4 words were. Some archives hint the child lives still. Others whisper, the poison was yours. Whatever they were, Captain Ulrich's sword moved faster than sound. 1 strike. Silence. The body was wrapped in coarse linen, carried through a servant's tunnel, buried before dawn in a walled garden behind the inner house. Officially, the quiet garden grew rare medicinal herbs for the royal pharmacy. In reality, the soil there has never been turned by any gardener since 1748. Too many secrets underneath. At 7 o'clock, the Queen walked into the king's bedchamber carrying a silver tray, hot coffee, warm bread, and a single document. She kissed her husband on the forehead like any loving wife and said softly, "Darling, you were so tired last night. You signed this in your sleep." Poor Lord Varneskold suffered a fatal stroke. Tragic. King Adolf looked at the parchment. His own signature, perfect down to the little flourish he only used when drunk. He understood instantly that his gentle wife had just stolen the kingdom from him without spilling a single drop of blood in public. For the next 33 years, no one inside the palace ever spoke Henrik's name again. New servants were warned on their first day. Ask about the quiet garden, and you will vanish. The Queen grew old gracefully, surrounded by grandchildren and flattering portraits. She died in 1781, at the age of 76. Rosary in her hands, priests singing. History called her the mother of the nation. The king followed her 2 years later. Courtiers said he died of a broken heart. Some of the older guards knew better. Then, in the winter of 2017, a young historian named Dr. Linnea Sjöström was cataloging a forgotten noble estate outside Stockholm. In a dusty attic, she found a small leather folder tied with faded red string. Inside, 1 sheet of heavy rag paper watermarked 1747, a death warrant. The text ordered the immediate execution of Lord Henrik Varneskold for high treason proven in camera. At the bottom, the royal signature. But when the document was examined under ultraviolet light, the truth appeared like a ghost. The ink strokes the pressure of the quill, even the microscopic hesitation before the capital. All of it was Queen Elisiv's handwriting, not the king's. For the first time in 269 years, undeniable proof existed that the gentle queen had committed judicial murder. Today, if you take the public tour of Ellearnvik Palace, the guide will smile sweetly and tell you the quiet garden is closed for restoration, It has been closed for restoration every single year since 1748. The gate is still locked with the original iron padlock. And if you linger too long trying to peer through the keyhole, a guard will suddenly materialize and ask you, very politely, to move along. Some of the older staff, the ones who have worked there for decades, will lower their voices if you buy them coffee off the grounds and ask about Queen Elisiv. Their answer is always the same. She was the real king. We just weren't brave enough to say it out loud, till now. So like this video right now, if you believe there are more Shadow Queens hiding in plain sight. Comment the word quiet if you made it to the end. I read every single one, and I'll heart them all. And if you want the next part, the story of the princess who found her mother's secret diary 50 years later and tried to burn the entire palace down with the truth, smash the bell, because that one ends with a locked tower and a fire no one talks about.
If you enjoyed diving into this strange, scandalous corner of history, make sure to unlock more secrets with us here at Throne of Scandals. Hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss a story hidden behind the golden doors of the past, because history is full of mysteries.